Well, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Really appreciate you. Can't even talk. That's bad. Second sentence when we're already stuttering. But really appreciate you all braving the Atlanta rain that's been going. It feels like about 3 weeks now to be a part of the Technology Association of Georgia's Summit. My name is Rayford Davis. I'm a principal in Amazon Web Services Digital Innovation Group. This is a group across the globe where we invest in our customers. We have a unique way that we have innovated on behalf of our customers called the Working Backwards process. And we have a group, the Digital Innovation Group, that we use to partner with our customers. Today we have Chris Bush from LeasePlan, one of our customers, such that we can help them innovate for their customers. We don't hold this out to be the only way to innovate by any stretch. There are lots of companies that have been very successful. But what we have found is that we've done a couple of things here and there that have been successful for us. And so we're happy to share them. And we hope that if you can take one or two things away that you can plug in to your secret sauce, that we'd be happy about that. So that said, I'm going to talk to you about the Working Backwards process, a little bit about the Digital Innovation Program, and then I'm going to have Chris come up and talk about how LeasePlan has taken parts of that to add to their secret sauce. So for us here at Amazon, the way we start and where we started was our mission was always to be Earth's most customer-centric company from the very beginning. Though as many of you know, we started off as an online book e-commerce retail, we always had this vision about customer centricity. Now when you see this mission, it might make it feel like, well, that just means you're going to be all things to all people. Not so. This actually ends up being a criteria for us. So even when we're looking across multiple different projects that we need to greenlight and where we think about which resource are we going to allocate, the criteria ends up being which one can deliver the most customer delight. So that customer centricity ends up being a criteria for us to decide what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, or what we're going to keep investigating before we greenlight and move it forward. As I mentioned, we know there's lots of different ways to start a company. Some have started with focusing on a technology. Some has focused on starting with a market or a business model. For us, we focus on starting with a customer. And I'm going to read this quote from you from Jeff Bezos to explain why. There are many advantages to a customer-centric approach, but here's the big one. Customers are always beautifully, wonderfully dissatisfied, even when they report being happy. Even when they don't know it yet, customers want something better. So when we launched Prime, nobody was beating down our door saying, Amazon, please start a 2-day subscription delivery service, right? What they were looking for was convenience, right? And so waiting and not knowing when you were going to get your package somewhere in the next 2 to 7 days just wasn't convenient. And so we launched Prime. Now that was then. Fast forward, we're over a decade past the launch of Prime, and now 2-day delivery service isn't the most convenient. I do a lot of traveling, some of you may as well. So right now I live in Atlantic Station. When I'm traveling to Seattle and I order that 65-inch Samsung TV from Amazon and it's delivered to my doorstep and I'm going to be there more than 2 days, that's not the most convenient thing. So now we've got Amazon days. So I can designate when I get back on Thursday night, I want that TV to arrive on Friday, right? So it's really about obsessing about your customer, understanding what their needs are, and continuing to iterate and innovate on their behalf. So when we look at these successes, yes, this is from the marketing department, that we've had, each of these came from really obsessing about a specific customer. And at Amazon, we practice human-centered innovation. So that customer is a person, even in a B2B context, right? Whether it's B2B or B2C, it's find out who is the individual that has a problem that we need to solve and then innovate on their behalf. So for us, creating great products and services comes from starting with being customer obsessed. We start with customer obsession and then we work backwards to actually come up with innovation. At Amazon, particularly at Amazon Web Services, we've got lots of technology, products, and services back in the closet. However, when it comes to innovation, we don't start there. We'll get lots of customers that we're working with that say, hey, we want to use your newest machine learning thing, or we want to use your newest IoT. And we say, that's great, that's nice, but the worst thing that we want to do is give you the tools and you create a hammer looking for a nail, right? What we want to do is first say, what problem are you trying to solve? That's what we've done internally. So to do this, we actually have the 5 working backwards questions, okay? First question, who is the customer, right? And once again, when it comes to innovation, not from an account management relationship standpoint, but to innovate, to create a new product, service, or experience, it is who is that person? So let's say if it's a manufacturing facility, right? Well, it may be the operator of one of the units in that plant, if you will, but it's not the company as a whole. So who is that customer? And be very targeted with, kind of what that customer segment is. We like to define not just what their demographic profile is, right? We start to think about their psychographic profile, their technographic profile, right? Kind of all the different ways that we can think about who is this customer so we can obsess about them and then work backwards. 1. 2, what is the problem or opportunity? Make sure we're very clear about what we're solving. In technology, it's real easy to go, wouldn't it be cool if? Wouldn't it be cool if we could, right? Well, that might be cool, but it might not be solving a problem. If you don't solve a problem, what will happen is somebody will use that cool one time and they'll put it down. If it's solving a problem, they'll use it over and over and over. And that's what's needed for an innovation to take off, right? Because for an innovation to take off, the first time, it's never right, right? You need to iterate. So if they're using it over and over, then you can get that customer engagement to iterate on the product. 3, what is the most important customer benefit and is it clear, right? We can all think of technologies and products that have multiple features. Once again, in technology, it's easy to get feature creep, right? It's easy to add on. But if you don't hit the home run with that one specific most important feature, it's not going to take off. 4th, how do you know what the customer wants? That's our push internally to ourselves to say, bring the data, bring the numbers. I know you've been working in your field for 10 years, 20 years, and this is as we talk to our colleagues. Bring the data because you can glean more insights, right, out of the data across the customer base than just an individual's experience. And then last, what does the customer experience look like? Before I came to Amazon, I was running a startup in Silicon Valley. We were going through Y Combinator, and we talk a lot about minimum viable products. When I got to Amazon, we don't talk about minimum viable products. We talk about minimum lovable products. Very different. Why? Minimum viable, get it out the door as long as it can do something. When you think about minimum lovable product, it's never right the first time, but if it's lovable, doesn't mean it works perfectly, but that the customer can see where you're going. The customer will give you grace as you iterate, right? When we came out with the first Kindle, that was a big, kind of clunky thing, right? But our target customer wasn't anybody that's literate. Our target customer was the voracious reader. And it was, how can we put any book in the world in the hands of a voracious reader in 60 seconds or less, right? We baked in cellular service that we paid for in that first version, because at that time, Wi-Fi wasn't ubiquitous. So in that way, the voracious reader could see where we were going and what we were trying to do. Though the product wasn't perfect, they could see where lovable would come from, right? So that experience really matters, not just that the technology works. How does it feel? These are humans. We're all humans. So whether you're in a B2B context or a B2C, right? It's a lot easier for somebody to buy and use when they feel great using it. Now, as we answer these 5 questions internally, which by the way can be answered in 5 days or 5 months, depending on how deep you go, we go through a process where we capture our thinking in what are called the working backwards artifacts. So the working backwards process has 3 artifacts: a press release, a set of FAQs, and a visual. And I'm going to talk through each one of those. So first, the press release. Well, it's a typical press release like many of you have written or read, right? It'll have a headline, a date, a summary. It'll articulate what the customer problem is, what the solution is. It'll even have a leader quote. the leader of the group of leading the organization. We'll also have a fictitious customer testimonial. Why is it fictitious? Because we write this press release before we write any line of code. This press release is written in advance, where we leap into the future, and then we articulate what is that customer experience going to be. And so what this does is it starts to anchor the team, not in the requirements, kind of the technology, not in the requirements of the innovation, but once again, how are we solving that nail? Don't want to be a hammer looking for a nail, right? We want to make sure we clearly articulate what that experience is that the customer is supposed to have, and we do that in this one-page press release. Important that it's just one page. Really hard to get all of that concisely into one page. Easy to just kind of run on and describe it more and more, and for the leader quote, and for, no. To really push yourself to get to one page really forces us to say, what is that one most important customer benefit? We'll have teams that want to list all the different benefits, right? Nope, push one most important benefit. So we write this one-page press release before we write in a line of code. The second working backwards artifact, 2 sets of FAQs. So one set is customer FAQs. The second set are what we call stakeholder FAQs. Customer FAQs, typical. What would a customer ask? What is it? Where do I buy it? How much does it cost? What happens if it breaks or I need support, right? Those questions. The stakeholder questions. These are the questions that all of the internal groups need to answer as we bring this innovation to life. So the finance team is going to ask, what's the investment required? What's the payback period, right? The CIO's function, right? They're going to ask, well, where does the data come from? Where does it go? How do we know it's secure? Does it integrate with our legacy systems? Marketing is going to ask, who's your target market? What channel are you going to use, right? What's the right messaging? Whoever's in product management, they're going to say, well, kind of what's the market for this? How big is it going to grow and how fast? So they're all the typical questions that you would ask in a business plan. We just don't write business plans, right? We capture all of those same thinking and questions in the stakeholder FAQs. Now, the interesting thing about it is, as we get more input and thinking from around the entire Amazon team, they add more FAQs. And so the list continues to grow and grow. And so we don't have to have every question answered before we go to launch. It's often just as important, sometimes maybe even more important to know, what questions do we need to answer as we go through the iteration process that is built. At Amazon, getting to launch isn't when we celebrate, right? Getting to launch is just the start of the game, because it's all about that iteration. You got to get something out the door, get it in front of a customer, get that customer feedback, and then iterate. And so having these FAQs as we go through it really helps us to codify our thinking and to make sure that we're asking the tough questions. We often say internally that if there's a really, really hard question that either is going to be asked by somebody or you think about yourself, you need to put it in there because it's going to come out at some point. Even if you don't have the answer, you need to know that that question needs to be answered. So those first 2 artifacts are fairly long form, kind of wordy documents, if you will. At Amazon, we really don't use slides that much. We use long form documents. This is one of the few times that they allow me to use slides. But those long form documents can often take the innovation to a more complex articulation. So the third artifact, the visuals, is our homage to keep it simple, stupid. So at some point in the innovation process, somebody will say in the team room, grab a marker and go to the board. Draw this thing up. What is it, right? And we're not prescriptive about what the visual needs to be, right? So it could be a user interface. If it's very technical, it could be data flows. It could just be a user journey map, right? So not prescriptive, but some kind of way that alongside those 2 long-form documents, right, we have something that's, kind of just much more visual way to articulate what this innovation is. Now, once we get those 3, it's not about now we've got nice 3 documents and we kind of put them on a shelf. We beat them up and we beat each other up and we iterate on these. So if we back ourselves up, kind of about 5 to 10 years ago at Amazon, if you were to go into a conference room, you would see at every table a cup of red pens, because that's what we would do. We'd print out the documents, and you'd take a red pen and beat it up. Well, now we're in 2020, and we figure we don't have to, kind of print out all the trees. And so now we have an internal tool called WorkDocs, enterprise collaboration and sharing. But we do this same thing virtually. We start our meetings in silence. What do we do in silence? We're reading those documents. And so the owner of the innovation doesn't start by pitching their idea. It should all be captured there in the documents. What happens is once we stop reading, be that 5 minutes, 20 minutes, even 30 minutes, we actually go right to Q&A, right? The document should speak for itself. And then, okay, who's got questions? And then we start with those hard questions. It's very weird for me the first time when I got to Amazon. And I will admit that there was one meeting, in my first week, I showed up a little bit late to one meeting, and everybody was silent. And I'm like, what is happening here? And I didn't want to ask because, I'm new guy, that kind of thing. And, kind of leaned over and they're like, check the link. I'm like, open it up, and everybody's reading. But it's a really cool way to, quite frankly, democratize the ability to innovate, right? Because some people are good presenters and some people aren't. But everybody can have great innovative ideas. So it's not about who can pitch the idea and sway everybody. It's let the thinking speak for itself, right? And so everybody can be innovative. So a couple of years ago at one of our all-hands meetings, Jeff Bezos was asked about the working backwards process and was it necessary? And I want to share with you his answer.
Is the working backwards process optional? It sounds great, but it seems like a lot of work. Oh boy, how do we begin? The working backwards process should not be optional unless you know a better way. And you shouldn't know a better way until you've tried the working backwards process several times. The working backwards process really does work. And this particular thing here, it sounds great, but it seems like a lot of work. Done correctly, the working backwards process is a huge amount of work, but it saves you even more work later. The working backwards process is not designed to be easy. It's designed to save huge amounts of work on the back end and to make sure that we're actually building the right thing. What so many companies do is they write the software. That's a lot of work. They get it all working, and then they throw it over the wall of the marketing department and say, okay, here's what we built. Write the press release for it. That process is the one that's actually backwards.
So we've all heard the, kind of work smarter, not harder, right? Well, I'm assuming all of you all work in innovation in some form or fashion, right? There's no not work hard in innovation, right? Like just by definition of creating something new that's never existed to solve a problem that hadn't been solved, it's hard work, right? But this is our approach to working smart while we're doing that hard work. So, I want to transition the discussion from that is our working backwards process that we use internally to create new products and services, whether they be, kind of B2B or B2C products, kind of outside of Amazon. In 2017, we had the privilege of being named the most innovative company in the world by Fast Company magazine. And a lot of our customers at that time said, hey, love your products and services, but we need to innovate on behalf of our customers too. Would you mind helping us and sharing, kind of your secret sauce? And so we do. And so we'll have lots of executive sessions where we'll share openly with our customers. Here's, kind of how we do it. But we said, let's go a step farther, right? Why just tell them what we do? Why not do it with them? And so we came up with kind of a quasi-consultancy, if you will, called the Digital Innovation Program, where we engage with our customers. It's about a 2 to 4 month engagement process where we do the process that I just walked through with them to actually help them work backwards to innovate on behalf of their customer. So, kind of as we go through this process, it's anchored in the middle by a full 1-day working backwards workshop. But before we get to that workshop, we got to make sure everybody's prepared and ready to reap the benefits of that investment of time. So first, we'll do where we start. We obsess about the customer. And so we work with our customer to obsess about their customer, right? You know, I gave the example before of a manufacturing facility. In a former life, I was a chemical engineer and worked in refineries. So, you know, I like to point at this guy right here. We'll call him Jack, right? Jack works in a refinery. He doesn't have the authority, the budget authority, nor does he run technology. So we need to keep in mind those people, and they're part of his context, right? The CIO, the CFO, they're important, but we have got to solve Jack's problem, right? This goes back to human-centered innovation. If we create something that actually fits within inside the financial framework of the CFO, or fits within inside the technology framework of the CIO, but if it doesn't solve Jack's problem, doesn't matter, right? So important to just really focus in on who is that right customer. And so we do that in working with our customers. Then we find it's really important to know what is the question that we need to answer. And so we come up with an example problem statement and challenge statement going into the workshop. This is an example from a media customer that I worked with last year, where the problem statement was today, after the Take Action user has read a local news story on a screen-based device, they are not able to connect with the situation in a meaningful way that allows them to impact the situation. That came after lots of research and iteration where we boiled it down. And so then we said, okay, so now what's the charge to this full-day workshop? How might we go beyond delivering content about a story to helping users become a part of the story? And so now that we have this charge for the workshop, there'll be somewhere between 6 to 9 members of the customer team. There'll be about 3 to 6 of the Amazon team. And then we'll go through a full day working backwards workshop. In this workshop, forgive this eye chart, but I'll just kind of walk you through the big chunks. The first part of the day, we're going to spend obsessing about the customer again. The second part of the day, we're going to really ideate, and I mean no ideas off the table. After lunch, we work with the customer to really figure out which of these ideas is the most important in solving the customer benefit. Remember before I talked about the customer centricity ends up being our criteria. That ends up being our criteria. And then at the end of the day, we outline the PR, FAQ, and visuals. And so in the same way that we innovate internally, we develop the press release, the FAQ, and the visuals with our customer. This articulates the first idea of what to build. Now, it's an iterative process, so we won't end there, but you got to know where you want to start. So once we have figured out what to build, then we go into a build process where now we want to build prototype, right? And the powerful thing about the AWS platform is that it's really inexpensive, you know, to build a prototype. I don't know what size companies, I'm sure we have all size companies represented here. You know, I've worked in startups, literally starting off my kitchen table out of a buddy's garage. Well, when we started that buddy's garage, it was during the first dot-com boom and bust, right? Raised $2.5 million, went bankrupt in 2.5 months, never got a product out the door. Happened. The last startup that I started before coming to Amazon, got the product out the door with 50 grand out of my kitchen table, right? The power of the cloud, right? Now you have a lot lower cost of failure, right? You can iterate a lot faster. You can build prototypes and get that in front of a customer to find out, should I keep going down this path before I invest millions of dollars? And that's one of the things that we want to bring to our customers. Though our customers may be large enterprises that we're doing this with, doesn't mean you've got to invest large enterprise dollars to get data to tell you which direction to go. Once we figure out the right innovation to scale, then we want to work with them to actually scale it. Do they have the right technology platform to scale it? Do they have the right organization to support this innovation at scale? We can help them think about that. And so this ends up being, you know, kind of how we work with them over a few months to help them innovate on behalf of their customers. One last point on this is that every customer doesn't need that depth of engagement, and so we formed some lighter touch models. One where we just kind of frame the challenge, that pre-work, if you will, sometimes just helping them be customer-centric and clarify what needs to be done is value enough. Sometimes they say, you know what, we don't need the full day workshop and all the PR FAQ, right? We want to just focus on something really quickly and we can do a mini workshop. So we try to be customer-centric in this mode to try to engage them based off of what they need. And in this way, hopefully they can create something that can be a delightful product for their customer. I actually want to bring up Chris Bush now, who is VP of Product Manager Product Development.
Management.
Management, thank you. At Lease Plan. To me, it's just Chris.
Yeah.
And he's going to share with you how Lease Plan thinks about innovation.
Thank you, Rayford, and thanks for the opportunity to come in today. So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about Lease Plan, but also kind of weave in what it's like to be on the other side of the table, because that's where we are right now. We're going through this process, being led by Rayford specifically, kind of talk about what we've learned during this. And so who are we? We're a fleet management company, and so we do company cars. So if you've ever driven a company car, know somebody that has, maybe a salesperson or a service person, that's what we do. You can read all the statistics up here. We've been doing this for quite a while. Big global company, 1.8 million vehicles under management worldwide. So what does that really mean? So one of our mission is to provide innovative, sustainable vehicle leasing solutions, whoever you are and wherever you need to be, so you can focus on what's next. And so Rayford talked about the customer-centric, customer focus on the AWS side. We've got that exact same customer focus on the fleet management side. And we're always looking to see where can we go to next, right? Always forward thinking for our clients in what some people may think to be traditionally kind of a vanilla type of industry, right? You think about fleet management and what we do. So this is what we do in a nutshell. We don't build the vehicles, so we can't really innovate on that end. We don't change the oil, so we can't really innovate on that end. We don't repair the vehicles, so we can't really innovate on that end. But we are responsible for managing this entire life cycle for our clients. And one piece that isn't up here, that's a really important part of what we do, is the driver, right? So that is an area where all of a sudden we can start to make an impact. So you've got a human being involved in this process. We like to say that your driver's right foot is the most expensive thing about this process. You know, how fast are they going? How good of drivers are they? How hard are they braking? How many accidents are they getting into? Impacts their total cost of ownership within this particular life cycle. So when we first sat down with Rayford, I'll admit, right, we've got plenty of design thinking experience. My boss is actually certified in design thinking. So we're sitting across the table and he kind of introduced us and he started to take us through this process. And what y'all may not know is that as Rayford was kind of taking you through the process, I'm watching all of y'all, right? So I see the eyebrows go up. I see kind of the heads cock sometimes when he's explaining the process. And we were there too, right? That's exactly what we were doing. What do you mean we're going to write a press release before we even really figure out what we're doing in this thing? That's crazy. That's lunacy. Now, the reality is that our marketing folks are sitting over there going, God, this is brilliant. You know, where has this guy been our entire life? You know, because we've been the ones who will build something, we'll toss it over the fence, and then we'll, hey, go market this thing, right? Go help us sell this. So they love the concept of it, but we had to be very open to thinking a little bit differently, right? I was at a session not too long ago, and the gentleman up there used actually a terrible expression, but kind of makes sense. He said, when we go into a meeting, we have to kill the expert, right? Okay, that's a little bit extreme, I understand that, but his point was that we do this every single day, right? We've been doing this for a very long time. We think we know exactly how to do this and better than anybody else. And in reality, we've got to take a step back from that expertise, trust this process to go through, and find all of our blind spots that we're missing, and find those opportunities to innovate. And we did, right? There's a lot of variable costs within here that when you think about it differently, you realize there's ways to do it differently that can ultimately save our clients money, potentially save our clients' lives. You start talking about safety and things of that nature too. Big on the sustainability side of things, part of the EV 100. So you know, our industry is changing, and it's changing quickly. When you think about electric vehicles, when you think about autonomous vehicles that are coming down the road, we've got to be out in front of this stuff, because if we're not innovating, we're very quickly going to be one of those case studies you read about that company that gets left behind. And then a few other things as far as just different things that we've kind of brought to the industry and brought to the table, really kind of trying to impact our drivers and impact their behavior and changes, just to kind of throw it up on the slide. So we're going through the process right now. It very much is one of those situations where the first few meetings, it was about building some trust. I mean, it really was about building some trust, trusting the process, right? Really going down this path with them. And there were times where kind of our heads would cock a little bit and our eyebrows would raise a little bit. And Rayford would get us back on track and say, just trust me, right? Trust the process that we're going through. And it's been great. It's been great not only in a sense for us on the product management side, as well as my IT colleagues on the product development side, but everybody else from the organization that we've been able to bring into this process has been outstanding. It was actually kind of a cool buzz after we did the workshop and all the folks that got to participate in it. All right, so that's kind of where we are, and then kind of open up for maybe a question too. We only got a couple minutes.
So we've got time for maybe one or two questions, kind of from the group, and then Chris and I'll be here in the front and happy to answer, kind of questions afterwards.
So you talked about the process, but can you expand on, is there anything you look at in terms of decision making and the decision making process itself, right? How do you come up with, how do you look at that? Who's making the decisions? What are the decision making factors? Is that part of what you do?
Yeah, so from a decision making standpoint, one of the things that I didn't go into that we talked to executives about in our culture of innovation is our organization structure. So we have small 2 pizza teams. Anybody heard of 2 pizza teams? Right? So small 2 pizza team with what we call single threaded ownership, right? And so specifically when it comes to innovation, we're all about speed. And so there's a single threaded owner who is responsible for making those decisions, whatever those decisions may be at their level. Now, there may be other decisions that they need to go up to a more senior level, but they go up to one person. So what we don't want, and I'm going to speak specifically about how we use working backwards within Amazon, we don't want them running around all the different groups inside of Amazon to try to navigate bureaucracy and get everybody's input to then make everybody's decision. We try to cut that out as much as we can. We deliberately want to cut down communication, actually, where, as you'll hear a lot of people say, kind of want to increase communication, kind of across our organization. Well, we want to increase communication across the team, right? We don't want to increase communication across the broader Amazon, right? And so we try to get that team to be very focused, right? They're cross-functional teams that have all of the skills and knowledge that they need to prove the next step, right? Important to say prove the next step because as we develop these teams, it may not be that they're going to take the product all the way to launch, but it's what's the next data points that we need to say that we should invest some more money, kind of in this project, right, moving forward. And so we want a single-threaded owner that can make that decision and keep moving forward, and that person is accountable, kind of for that. Does not mean that they have to get it right. One of the things I want to add on there about this decision making, we expect failure, right? So as we look across our organization, right, and we've all got our management objectives and our goals and targets, right? If you get to the end of the year and you're all greens, there's a problem. That means that somebody didn't have a big enough goal somewhere, right? Now, if you got all reds, there's a problem too. But the push there is not about being afraid to fail. It's about think big, figure out what the customer problem is, and go try to solve it. And then, if it doesn't work, right, we have a process that we call correction of errors, where we actually want to look back at what happened here so that we can learn from that. And so we've got plenty of failures that have happened. But to your question about decision making, single-threaded owner to make that decision and keep moving forward fast. That's a question? Yes, sir.
What's the level at which you apply your innovation process? I mean, is it for everything that you do at Amazon, or is it for things like Prime or Kindle, or big products or services that you're?
All of those came from the working backwards process.
Could it be even like you're adding a feature to, let's say, the checkout process?
That's right.
A simple feature.
So the working backwards process, as much as it has the artifacts that are articulated, it's also a mindset, right? And so the working backwards process is first starting with the mindset of customer obsession, right? That's where working backwards comes from, right? We actually didn't set out to create an innovation process. Let me start there, right? Where we started out was being customer obsessed. And it just so happened that being customer obsessed, if this is what the customer problem is, then how do we create something, and then how do we actually document and codify the work that we've been doing, and we end up with these artifacts. So now, if there is the most minor thing, let's say on Amazon.com, do we want to move the buy button from here to here? right? Well, hey, why would we do that? Well, somebody think about it. Now, do they have to write a full press release for that? Maybe not, right? But definitely when we're starting to think about new products and new services, when we think about all the different services, because I think we're over 195 services now on Amazon Web Services, right? Each of those definitely started with a press release, right? You know, kind of one feature here, one feature there, maybe not, but even if it's not a press release for that new feature, rest assured you will see the feel of the working backwards process, right? You will see the questions of how do we know the customer wants this? Where's the data that shows us that? How can we prototype that feature before we actually go build it, you know, and roll it out, you know, kind of broadly, you know, kind of if you will. One other tangent to the question that you asked about at what level that I think is important. Anybody at Amazon can write a press release. So we're asked all the time about innovation centers, right? Can you help us build an innovation center? And yes, we can provide our thoughts on that, but we don't build innovation centers at Amazon. Innovation is a part of everybody's job. Now, we do have folks that focus on, you know, kind of specific technologies, if you will, but it is not their sole domain. And so we now have tens of thousands of press releases all over the company that are in different stages of development. And so anytime somebody sees a customer problem that they think, what might that solution be? They can start to write a press release. And for us, that is really, really important because it starts to, one, we hire builders. And builders didn't just mean technologists. Builders mean people that look at a customer problem and want to innovate on behalf of that customer. And so we empower every one of them to actually do that. Chris, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, just add on to that just a little bit. So as far as the press release is concerned, we continue to use that as our point of focus. So as we're going through this process and all of a sudden we start to maybe kind of take a right turn down this direction, we then come back to the press release and say, okay, if we were to make this change or do something differently, right, how would that affect this press release? Are we really getting to what we want to get to? Is taking a right turn and going down this direction going to be as effective of a press release as where we started? So it's a great point to continue to come back to, continue to come back to, continue to come back to make sure you're staying focused and heading in the right direction.
Well, we're about out of time, but if there are other questions, I'm going to be up front. We have two of my colleagues here, Stephen Thomas, Brian Davis in the front. They'll be hanging around. Chris is going to be hanging around. And so, you know, kind of happy to talk to you afterwards or provide our contact information such that you can reach us, you know, kind of after the summit. Thank you so much for your time.